Hello, welcome to Get Your Mind On. I'm Lori Stohs. We're continuing our series on your approach, thinking about your approach to different things. So today I'm going to tell you a little story about Paul. You know, Paul is a great leader. He's been a leader of the organization for a long time and has great relationships and is able to connect with people very easily. But Paul's been managing someone, and recently there was a situation where the individual did not get promoted. Well, Paul realized that he didn't feel at the time, the reason the guy didn't get promoted was because of a few certain things that unfortunately Paul didn't tell him about. So now the time came, and the individual is saying to Paul, why didn't you tell me these things ahead of time? And now that I'm not promoted, I would have known them and could have worked on them, so maybe I would have got promoted. So he didn't really feel like he was covering his back. He felt like he didn't have a manager who was really his advocate. Well, as Paul and I had the conversation about this, Paul was doing one thing, avoiding conflict. You see, Paul's such a great guy, has great relationships and loves to build those relationships with people. But when it comes to tough things like dealing with conflict, it's difficult for him. And so Paul and I spent some time together thinking about conflict and what it is. And we really kind of went back as, why do you not love to, have, conflict? Nobody really loves conflict. But you really, this person is your responsibility in terms of your direct report, and giving feedback is your job. And he says, yeah, I know, but I didn't feel like he was ready. And I really didn't want to cause conflict. Well, we found that obviously that was a lesson learned. So when we think about conflict, today we're going to spend some time thinking about, what does conflict mean? How do you deal with conflict? So we all approach things differently, as we've talked over the past weeks, depending on what those topics are. So when we deal with conflict, how do you deal with conflict? Do you deal with conflict in a forceful method, meaning, I just need to get this done, and you kind of plow through it, and if there's conflict, it's kind of like a fight to you? Or maybe is there somebody, maybe one of you is one who really likes to avoid conflict, where I find more people in that instance where they just said, you know what, I just want to step back and not get close to the conflict and avoid it. Which we know when that happens, what happens? Sometimes people hope it goes away, but many times it continues on. Could be days, weeks, could be months, could be years that the conflict has occurred, and you're still holding that within, which is not a great thing when that conflict needs to be resolved. So we think about conflict, and when you're one of those individuals who are an avoiding conflict person, those of you who are conflict avoiders usually have a tendency to maybe have stronger relationship type of talents. You want to keep the relationship, and you don't want anybody to feel bad about you, or you to make them feel bad, or you're very cautious and deliberative, and you just don't want to go there with someone. So that might be the reason why. There's some of you who like to deal with conflict. I was meeting with a gal the other day, and she was a new member on the team, and she said, oh my gosh, I love to just have the conversation right away, because the longer it takes to get to the conversation, the more anxiety I have about it. So I loved that she was able to bring it to the table and have the conversation, not in a forceful method, but to be able to have the conversation with those individuals or that had conflict, so we could resolve it quickly. Now, when you think about some of the strengths that align to conflict, harmony is one of those. And sometimes it's interesting because we might have people who have harmony as a strength. And some people go, oh, they avoid conflict, which some will very much say, yes, I avoid conflict. But those who have harmony, maybe with some other strengths, maybe achiever or a few other push and drive ones, will want to have the conversation to prevent conflict from happening in the future. So let's go ahead and have the conversation now so we prevent it from happening and getting worse. So I think that's really important to know. How do you resolve it, and why do you resolve it, and when do you resolve it, and really what is it about? So speaking about what is it about, I think it's important to think about content. More and more as I'm working with people, there's always this feeling of conflict. Maybe I have an expectation, you're not meeting my expectation, or there's something that's misaligned that happened and I need to tell you about that, and therefore, you don't like that conflict piece. But when you really think about the conflict and think about the content, so are there certain areas when dealing with conflict that it's easy for you? Nothing's really easy. I guess I shouldn't say that, but it's easier for you that maybe it's something about work, about a topic at work, or something that's written, or some materials that you're presenting, that's easier to talk about. Sometimes if it's a personal thing, like I want to tell you something about your behavior or a relationship or something, that's sometimes difficult for some people. And then it might just be really someone's approach to something that you feel that they should approach it differently. So I would encourage you to really think about what are the different content areas when you think about conflict, and what's the maybe easier for you and more challenging for you if you're dealing with conflict. So for positive charge this week, I want you to think about, number one is, how do you deal with conflict? Number two, analyze the situation and think about, do you avoid it? Do you hit it head on? Or do you just sit down and have a conversation? And three, think about the content areas when dealing with conflict, and what areas are of strength to you and what maybe you might avoid. So dealing with conflict is something we have all the time in our lives, because we have people in our lives. And just like the story with Paul, sometimes we learn lessons of friendships, of trust, of integrity, of really our jobs and our roles as managers and leaders and individuals when we're team members. So I really want you to think about what that means for you, and how you can really take those lessons learned for you and understanding your conflict areas to move forward in the future. Thanks for joining us today, and remember to get your mind on.